We continue our discussion with Stephen Yates and Professor Wang Yiwei about the high-level talks between Asian leaders and US President Barack Obama that's taking place right now. Stephen Yates, let me start with you this time. There are currently tensions between Japan and South Korea, and these tensions date back to the war and Japan's role in South Korea, especially over the brothel women, as the case has come to be known. Will the president try and help heal relations between these two countries, diffuse tensions?
Well, I presume that will be among the objectives, but frankly, it's one of those where it's more maintenance of good relations between our country and theirs, and trying to encourage them to focus on issues of common ground and common interest. We really have no way to try to shape the domestic politics in each of the countries that informs how sensitive these issues remain. Obviously, a lot of time has passed and we live in a different era, but we continue to have political acts on both sides that can antagonize. Presidents will usually try to get them to expand their vision, talk about common challenges that we need to meet, but each president has his own approach to that, and we'll see what President Obama tries.
What is your view, Professor Wang?
Well, yes, the U.S. have the bilateral airlines in Asia Pacific, but now they need to have the network of all of the airlines, so-called, some people say that the Asians, NATO, whatever. So South Korea and Japan's confrontation is not in the Americans' interests. And not only because of the island dispute, but also the conflict woman. And the conflict woman also challenged the Americans' moral standard. So I think that damaged the Japanese image in Japan to make the U.S. side, especially for the Capitol Hill, to protect Japan, to tighten the airlines, have some difficulties.
Stephen Yates, I want to address another issue, and that is the relationship between South Korea and the Democratic People's Republic of Korea. We know that the Democratic People's Republic has threatened South Korea on several instances. What kind of assurances will the president be giving South Korea in that respect?
I think that one is one of the greater challenges in the trip. I mean, fundamentally, what we've seen unfold in Europe and somewhat in the Middle East is a degree of doubt about America's staying power and honoring commitments to allies, and in terms of enforcing international agreements. After all, the current conflict in the Ukraine centers around a 1994 international agreement that's been violated. There's question about the United States and its alliance's approach to that. So with regard to the Korean Peninsula, we have decades of agreements and commitments there as well. North Korea hasn't just rhetorically threatened South Korea, they have actually hit South Korean territory and killed South Koreans in some of these smaller scale skirmishes in recent times. And since Kim Jong-un's come to power, there have been a series of provocative acts that we aren't really quite sure how best to respond to and aren't really sure what direction he's going. So I think that South Koreans probably preoccupied with the ferry disaster and domestic politics related to that, but very close behind it, concern about what a long-term approach to North Korea can really be.
Professor Wang, can the president do anything more than reassure South Korea that the United States is there to stay, it will protect South Korea should there be any kind of attack from the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, or is he going to go any further?
Well, the South Korea side always think about the North as a threat, as a challenge. So they need to seek the help from China and also the protection from the United States. So given that rumor that North Korea will have the so-called the fourth round of the nuclear test, and this is, I think this is a mutual challenge not only for China, South Korea, Japan, and United States. Probably this is an opportunity for those countries to build more cooperative relations to despite the so-called territory dispute. I think especially for the China-US so-called the new type of major countries relations.
Stephen Yates, there is another foreign policy view which you hear often in Washington, and it goes something like this. And the question that's asked is, should the United States be reiterating its security treaty obligations to countries like Japan, the Philippines, South Korea, rather than cultivating a better relationship with China for what will inevitably one day become a bipolar world?
Well, I don't know that there's anything inevitable in politics, whether it's international or domestic. I think that most governments of the United States over the last 40 years have tried to do a little bit of both of these two important objectives. And it's a hedging strategy to a degree, but it's actually sincere on another level as well. We don't have a vote in China's leadership on how far it wants to go in cooperating with the United States, or what risks the people in the government of China are willing to take to stabilize other parts of the world where our interests may not always align. And so we're going to have a complex balancing act between this notion of reassuring and deterring, reassuring allies and deterring China, at the same time trying to cooperate where we can.
Right, Professor Wang, we just heard Stephen Yates there talk about a balancing act. I mean, we often hear about the pivot to Asia, rebalancing, call it what you will. So the president has to show support for his allies, but at the same time not alienate China, right?
Yes, they try to keep the balance, I think, but this is a difficult game. Actually, the bilateral alliance is a Cold War legacy. They need to amend, to modify, even to change this kind of alliance system, because the alliance, they have the so-called the given enemy, or they do it bilaterally. Today, the threat is not just from particular countries, it's more from in a very general and non-traditional way. So it's more comprehensive. So I think the U.S. cannot just rely on the alliance, to tighten the alliance to deal with the challenges, not only for the alliance but also for the United States. Given that the only two countries today, that the Philippines and Japan, openly consider about China as a threat or challenge, but other U.S. allies like South Korea and Malaysia and Thailand, I don't think they consider about China as a threat.